Hi, this is Roger. In this video, we're going to take a look at one of the quality of metric issues between the Moxie and some competitive devices. Now, you may recognize the shape of this competitive device here, but we're not picking on any one particular competitive device. This is really an issue that is quite widespread, and a lot of even much more expensive devices have this same issue. So I'm just going to start out here at rest, and I'm going to have both devices measuring on my arm. So the Moxie data is displayed on the top, and the competitive device data is displayed on the bottom. So first I'll get a reading on my forearm with the competitive device. Now this may take a couple of seconds to get a valid reading here. We'll just wait for it. I'm not sure I'm always using this device correctly. Sometimes it takes a long time for it to get the first reading. There it goes. So a very normal number, reading a 78 or so. Now it might bounce around here a little bit till it gets its smoothing filter or smoothing buffer filled up. But this is a pretty common resting number. So we're seeing right around 77, 78. In there somewhere with the competitive device. Now I'm also going to measure on the thenar eminence muscle, which is this part of the thumb. Now this device, and really the Moxie also isn't really intended to measure here, but it helps to show the robustness issues with this measurement quality. So here on the thenar eminence, this competitive device is getting in the upper 60s. Again, a pretty common number. And I'm really just focused on the SMO2 for this comparison. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and then we'll do the same thing with the Moxie. Measure on the forearm, and this is going to measure, a number as expected in the low 80s here, 80 or maybe upper 70s. So this is, what we would typically expect to measure on a forearm at rest. Just a bit higher than the competitive device, but not really substantially different. And then we'll also do a measurement on the thenar eminence with the Moxie. And it's common for the thenar eminence to measure a little bit lower than the forearm. And we're seeing this here measuring in the upper 60s or so. Maybe right around 70. Okay, so this is just the at-rest measurement. And now what we want to do is to try and exemplify this issue. I've got a blood pressure cuff. I'm going to use it as a tourniquet on my upper arm, and so I'm going to go ahead and inflate this. Somewhere, 220 or so. So we're for sure getting a good occlusion going. And then we're just going to let me rest for a little bit. Make sure you keep this inflated. And I'll put the Moxie on, and we can see the SMO2 trending down as the muscle is still consuming oxygen, but we've really kind of stopped off the blood flow. And I'm going to tense up a little bit here just to make it use a little more oxygen so things go a little faster. You can see the SMO2 is trending down. Now, in this occlusion case, we would expect to see the SMO2 get really close to zero because we've completely stopped blood flow, but the muscle is still consuming oxygen. And we'll see that this kind of slowly approaches zero. As we get near the bottom, it kind of slows down. So there we're at 9 on the Moxie. 8. And then I'm also look at the Moxie on the thenar eminence. See where that is. That's showing a little bit higher yet. Oops. Depends a little bit on position, I suppose, but a few points. So we're still seeing the thenar eminence trickle down as well. But getting down to those really low values, which is what you would expect because we have this occlusion up over 200 millimeters. Mercury. And so both on the thenar eminence and on the forearm, the Moxie is showing what I would call really low numbers. We're getting down into the the tens and the single digits for numbers here. And this is what you expect in this kind of occlusion. And if we'd wait long enough, we can probably even get it to go down to 0. But then we're going to go back and take a look with this competitive device here. And I'll put this on here. We'll give this a few seconds to take a reading again. And now, with the biggest issue with the technology differences between the Moxie and these other devices just aren't able to get a really good reading with respect between 0 and 100. That's a pretty challenging thing to do. And so here we're seeing it starting to get readings on the forearm. And even though I've had this cuff occlusion on here for quite a while, I'm still at 220 millimeters of mercury. You can see it in my hand. My hand is turning blue, and we're still reading in the 50s and 60s for this competitive device. Just to give you an idea of the difference, you can see that I'm very much deoxygenated on my left arm. You can tell the difference in skin color there. And it just does not have the dynamic range here on the forearm. Now, what's interesting is when I measure on the thenar eminence, we're going to get some different readings from this device. So it does read much lower on the thenar eminence. And this is just due to, there's some tissue differences between the two. This is a thinner skin and a thicker fat, and there's very little fat at the thenar eminence, but a little bit thicker skin. And this is the type of thing that these less sophisticated sensor algorithms just are simply not able to accommodate as well as the Moxie. So here it's reading 4 on the thenar eminence, and again, I'll go back to the forearm, and we're going to be reading something quite a bit higher. Give it a few seconds to update here. Yeah, we're still reading, around 60. Let's see if the Moxie will still give us a reading. Yeah, so the Moxie still is reading in the single digits there. It's reading a 4 in that position. And let's see, 6 or so, 6 or 10 on the 3. So it's getting really close to 0, just bouncing, very close to 0, which again is what we would expect in this situation. And now I'm going to get this. We're also going to we're going to release the cuff here because I'm getting kind of tired of having it on. I'm going to get this device reading again, and we're just going to show what happens when we release this cuff. Okay, take a reading. Come on. Give it just a few more seconds to take a reading. Okay, there we go. So then I'm going to go ahead and release this cuff. And you can see the color hopefully returns back to my hand. Oh, it's nice and pink again. That's what we want to see. And we can see the SMO2 climbing up on the competitive device. So it does move the right direction. It just, the magnitude is just a lot smaller than on the Moxie because of the way the algorithm is less sophisticated in handling the layers of the tissue. So it moved up 20 some points here. From a cuff occlusion to a kind of the hyperemic response. And then if we look at the Moxie reading in this case, give that a second to update. So now the Moxie is reading in the 85, 83 kind of range. So the Moxie just has a much bigger dynamic range because it's able to sense what's going on that 0 to 100 scale much more appropriately.